They called my name, and for a moment, the hum of the Oak Ridge High School gymnasium faded into a low, expectant murmur. I stepped out from my row, cap straight, tassel brushing my cheek. Camera flashes sparked across the crowd, parents leaning forward, phones lifted high. That's when Gregory stood. "You're not my real daughter." His voice cut through the air, hard and deliberate. "So, as of today, I'm cutting you off." It was like a stone dropped into still water ripples of gasps, the rustle of programs, whispers snapping from row to row. Someone in the bleachers fumbled with their phone, already recording. My name was still echoing from the loudspeaker, yet here I was, center stage for an entirely different show. In the fourth row, Gregory stood tall in his tailored navy suit, arms crossed like he was delivering quarterly results at a board meeting. Vanessa sat beside him, her hand frozen halfway to Noah's head. The baby's lip trembled, sensing the shift in the air. I didn't stop walking. The natural thing would have been to fold into myself, to let the floor swallow me whole. That's what Gregory expected. That's what everyone expected, the tearful collapse, the desperate silence. Instead, I felt the familiar weight of the graduation folder in my hand, the envelope pressed flat inside it. Weeks of preparation hid there, its crisp edges warming against my palm. My heartbeat wasn't panicked, it was steady, the same rhythm I'd kept through late nights gathering proof, storing it like ammunition. I glanced at Gregory as I passed his row. His eyes met mine with that same detached authority I'd grown up under, but there was no recognition of what I carried, no suspicion. He believed he'd just stripped me of everything. The principal gestured me toward the diploma table, but I kept going, straight to the podium. The microphone loomed in front of me, the hum of the gym's air conditioning filling the pause. "I need to say something," I said, my voice carrying over the bleachers. 1,000 eyes followed me as I adjusted the mic. My fingers brushed the edge of the envelope inside the folder, and for the first time all morning, I let myself smile. It was time to tell them how we got here. 4 years earlier, the Aldridge house still smelled faintly of Isabel's lavender hand cream. She had a way of softening every corner fresh flowers on the kitchen table, handwritten notes tucked into my lunch, the low hum of her humming while she baked. Gregory called it clutter. She called it home. Gregory treated family life like a business contract. Dinner wasn't a place to talk about feelings. It was a report on grades, extracurricular achievements, and whether I was staying on track. Isabel would nudge me under the table when my answers came too quickly or too flat, her smile easing the sharpness in his tone. When she died, the lavender faded fast. Cancer had hollowed her out in months, and once she was gone, the house felt like a showroom tidy, polished, cold. Gregory didn't cry. Not once. He buried himself in work, and whatever thread of patience he'd had for me snapped. It was in those first months that I replayed the conversation we'd had when I was 12. I'd been sitting on my bed, knees pulled up, after overhearing a neighbor say I didn't look like either parent. Isabel sat beside me and took my hands. "We chose you. Marcy," she said, her voice steady but warm. "We wanted you. That's stronger than blood." Gregory had been in the doorway, arms crossed, silent. I remember thinking even then that her words were for both of us, reminding me I belonged, reminding him why. But after she was gone, the word adopted felt heavier in the air. Gregory never said it outright, but it became the undercurrent of every criticism, every distant glance. Without her, there was no one to soften the edges or translate the meaning behind his clipped sentences. I knew then, in that quiet, airless house, that if Gregory ever wanted me gone, he'd find a way to make it public, and when that day came, I would be ready. I just didn't realize how soon Vanessa would arrive to help him finish the job. 6 months after we buried Isabel, Gregory came home with Vanessa. He introduced her like she was a new acquisition, sleek, polished, expensive. She had the kind of beauty that belonged on the cover of a magazine-tailored suit, hair like it had its own stylist, perfume that lingered in the air long after she left a room. The first time she stepped inside, her eyes scanned the space like she was making a mental inventory. 2 weeks later, Isabel's photographs were gone from the mantel, replaced by glossy portraits of Gregory and Vanessa taken in a downtown studio. The worn quilt on the living room couch disappeared, replaced with a cashmere throw that was for visual appeal only. Even the kitchen lost its warmth, no more ceramic mugs with painted flowers. Just a matching set of white porcelain cups lined in perfect symmetry. Gregory seemed lighter around her, almost proud in a way I hadn't seen since Isabel's last healthy days. He called her Van in public, laughed at her dry comments, and deferred to her on everything from dinner plans to vacation spots. In return, she played the attentive wife flawlessly, at least where others could see. With me, it was different. In public, she smiled warmly, asked about school, and made sure to praise me in front of Gregory's colleagues. But when we were alone, her eyes sharpened, and her voice lost its softness. She would comment on my posture, my clothes, my unpolished way of speaking. They were small barbs, wrapped in the kind of tone you couldn't quite call cruel without sounding overly sensitive. It didn't take long to understand the unspoken message I wasn't her family, and I never would be, by the time she moved her things into Isabel's old closet. I'd already begun spending more time at the library and less at home. The house no longer smelled like lavender, it smelled like a department store. And in the center of it all, Vanessa was making herself comfortable in a role that had nothing to do with replacing a mother and everything to do with erasing one. Then came the announcement that would shift everything again. She was having a baby. It was a Tuesday morning when Vanessa set her coffee cup down and rested her hand on her still flat stomach. "We're having a baby," she said, her smile perfectly composed, like she was delivering a well-rehearsed line. Gregory's reaction was instant pure. Unfiltered joy. He pushed back his chair, pulled her into his arms, and spun her around the kitchen. I'd never seen him look at anyone that way. Not even Isabel in the old photographs. He called it our second chance, his voice thick with pride, as if I were a failed trial run and this was the real thing. From that day forward, every conversation seemed to orbit around the baby. Names, nursery colors, the safest car seat on the market. I became a bystander in my own home, a shadow moving through rooms now filled with registry catalogs and ultrasound pictures taped to the fridge. When Noah was born, a perfect, healthy boy with a tuft of dark hair, Gregory cried. Actual tears streamed down his face as he held him, whispering promises of everything they'd do together. I watched from the corner of the hospital room, invisible, wondering if he'd ever held me like that. It was during those hospital visits that I began to notice Caleb. Gregory's younger brother had always been around for family gatherings, but now he seemed to have a permanent place in the maternity ward. He brought expensive gifts, flowers that filled the room with scent, and always found a way to hold Noah for just a little too long. Vanessa's face transformed when he walked in. Her eyes lit up not the polite glow she wore for Gregory, but something warmer, more alive. She laughed too easily, leaned in too close, if Gregory noticed. He didn't show it. I tucked the observation away. The way you keep a puzzle piece in your pocket when you're not sure yet what picture it belongs to. At the time, I didn't know just how much it would matter. That understanding came late one night, long after the hospital visits had ended. It was just past midnight when I padded into the kitchen for a glass of water. The house was dark except for a thin strip of light spilling from the doorway. Vanessa's voice floated through the quiet, low but sharp. "We have to be careful until Noah's older. Greg doesn't know." I froze. The tone wasn't the clipped politeness she used with most people. It was intimate, almost pleading. There was a pause, then Caleb's voice, faint but distinct. My chest tightened. "You're pushing it," she whispered. "You're here too often." He's starting to notice how much attention you give the baby." Silence stretched. Then her words came faster, softer. "I know you want to be involved. I do too. But we can't risk it now. Not yet." The hum in my ears drowned out the next few sentences. I gripped the doorframe, my breath shallow. I didn't need her to say it outright. I knew. Noah wasn't Gregory's son. I stepped back into the shadow of the hallway before she could see me. My mind spun through images Caleb at the hospital, the way Vanessa's eyes followed him, the lingering touches, the private smiles, the pieces I'd been collecting for months snapped together in a single, sharp click. Confronting her now would be useless. She'd deny it, spin it into a misunderstanding, maybe even twist it so I looked paranoid. Gregory would believe her, he always did. No, if I wanted this truth to matter, I needed more than overheard words in the middle of the night. I needed something no one could dispute, proof that didn't just reveal the affair but shattered their carefully built facade beyond repair. I went back upstairs and sat in the dark, my water glass untouched. The temptation to march into their bedroom and tell Gregory everything burned in my chest, but I forced myself to breathe until it cooled. The truth was a weapon, and weapons were only effective when used at the right moment. I pulled a notebook from my desk and opened to a blank page. At the top, I wrote one word in capital letters, evidence. By morning, I had a plan. And Vanessa had no idea her midnight call had just started a countdown she couldn't stop. I started small. The next time Caleb came over, I made sure my phone was charged and my camera sound turned off. While Gregory stepped out to take a call, I caught Vanessa and Caleb standing too close in the kitchen, his hand resting briefly on her hip before she moved away. The moment was casual enough to dismiss, but I saved the photo anyway. It wasn't about one piece. It was about building a wall no one could climb over. I slipped a tiny recorder into the drawer of the console table by the front door, where Vanessa often made her private calls. Within days, I had snippets of her voice lowering when Caleb's name came up, the quick intake of breath when she answered and recognized his number. I labeled and stored each file, backing them up on a separate drive. The more I watched, the more I noticed. One afternoon, a receipt slid from Vanessa's purse as she reached for her keys. I picked it up before she could, pretending to glance at the store logo. It was for a jewelry boutique downtown one I knew she hadn't visited with Gregory. 2 weeks later, I saw it. The bracelet. Isabel's bracelet. Gregory had given it to Caleb after the funeral, saying he wanted to keep it in the family. Now it sat on Vanessa's wrist, gleaming under the kitchen lights like a trophy. That single sight burned hotter than anything else I'd discovered. Then I remembered something Gregory had done months earlier after a neighbor's break-in. He'd installed security cameras. What he didn't know was that the system automatically backed up recordings to a cloud account. I'd watched the installer type in the password while Gregory busied himself in the kitchen. Accessing the archive was easier than I expected. 3 months of footage unfurled on my screen, Vanessa welcoming Caleb inside when Gregory was at work. Their heads bent together over Noah's crib, his hand brushing her cheek in the living room, kisses stolen in the hallway. Each clip was time-stamped, clear, undeniable. By the time I closed the laptop, the folder on my drive had become a weapon. All I needed now was the perfect place and time to fire it. 3 weeks before graduation, I was heading upstairs with a load of laundry when I heard my name. Gregory's voice carried from the half-open door of their bedroom. It's time. I'll do it at graduation public. Final. No room for her to twist it later. Vanessa's laugh was low and satisfied. That will solve our problem. With her out of the way, Noah can grow up as the only child. I stayed frozen in the hallway, the basket digging into my hip. She's been spoiled long enough, Gregory went on. I've fulfilled my obligation. She can support herself from now on. Vanessa murmured something I couldn't catch, but I heard the smile in her voice. You'll be doing her a favor. She'll thank you someday. They spoke of me like I wasn't in the same house, like I was already gone. I backed away from the door, my pulse steady, my mind turning over their words. They thought graduation would be their stage, a clean break in front of an audience. What they didn't realize was that I'd been building my own performance for months, piece by piece. I went to my room, set the laundry basket down, and pulled open the desk drawer where I kept the growing collection of files, photos. Audio, receipts, security footage. My eyes fell on the empty space beside them, the place I'd been saving for the final proof. If they wanted a spectacle, I would give them one. Not the kind they planned, but one that would take apart their perfect facade in front of the same crowd they hoped to impress. It wouldn't just end their plan to erase me. It would rewrite the story entirely. All that remained was to prove what I already knew in my gut, that Noah wasn't Gregory's son. Getting the samples was easier than I'd expected. Gregory's hair came from the brush in the master bathroom. I slipped it into a plastic bag while he was outside trimming the hedges. Caleb's was even simpler. He stayed over one Sunday night after a family dinner, and I found a few strands in the guest bathroom sink the next morning. Noah's took more patience. Babies are messy, and Vanessa often left his pacifiers lying around. One afternoon, she set him down in the playpen and went to answer the door. I reached in, picked up the damp pacifier he'd just dropped, and tucked it into my pocket before she came back. The next day, I drove across town to a small, privately owned DNA lab I'd found online. The woman at the front desk barely looked up from her computer when I told her it was for a high school biology project. She slid a form across the counter, didn't ask for ID, and took the cash I'd saved from my bookstore job. Results in 2 weeks. She said, those weeks felt like years. Every time Caleb stopped by or Gregory beamed at Noah. The envelope I didn't yet have hovered in my mind. When the call finally came, I left work early, claiming a headache, and drove straight to the lab. The technician handed me a sealed envelope, her expression unreadable. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at it. My hands itched to tear it open. But something in me knew this moment deserved more than a parking lot. At home, I went to my room, pulled Isabel's favorite novel from the shelf, a worn copy of Jane Eyre, and slid the envelope inside. The spine closed around it like it had always belonged there. When I finally opened it, the words were as sharp as a blade. 99.9% probability Caleb Aldridge is the biological father of Noah Aldridge. I read it twice, folded it back into the envelope, and tucked it into the book. Graduation would be the day I turned that page. My name was still echoing through the loudspeakers when Gregory stood. "You're not my real daughter," he announced, voice cutting through the ceremony like a blade. "As of today, I'm cutting you off." The gym froze. Cameras rose. Whispers swelled. I didn't break stride, instead of heading to the diploma table. I walked straight to the podium, my fingers brushing the edge of the envelope hidden in my folder. The principal moved to intercept me, but I stepped around him. "I need to respond to that," I said into the microphone. The crowd hushed instantly. Gregory's right. I'm not his biological daughter. I've known since I was 12. And Isabel, my real mother, made sure I knew I was chosen and loved. Gregory's smirk faltered. I let the pause stretch, then opened the envelope slowly. But since we're sharing family truths? My gaze shifted to Vanessa. That son you've been showing off for the last 8 months. Gregory, he's not yours either. Gasps rippled. Vanessa's face drained of color. She shook her head, clutching Noah tighter. "This," I said, holding the papers high, "is a DNA test. It proves, with 99.9% certainty, that your brother Caleb is Noah's biological father." Chaos erupted, people standing, craning for a better view, phones recording every second. Vanessa bolted toward the exit, heels striking the floor in sharp bursts. The doors slammed behind her, leaving the noise to swell without her. Gregory stayed seated, his face a shifting canvas of disbelief and humiliation. I tucked the envelope back into my folder, walked to collect my diploma, and posed for the photograph as though the world around me hadn't just caught fire. By the time I left the stage, I knew nothing about his life would ever look the same again in the weeks after graduation. The story spread faster than I could keep track of. Vanessa filed for divorce almost immediately, taking Noah and disappearing from Oak Ridge without a forwarding address. Caleb tried to deny everything until the test results made their way through business circles. By the end of summer, his company had lost key contracts, and his spotless reputation was gone. Gregory didn't escape untouched. The boardrooms that once welcomed him stopped returning calls. Invitations dried up. Neighbors looked away when he passed. The man who had built his life on control and status found himself standing in the wreckage of both. 3 months later, he knocked on the door of my small apartment. His suit was wrinkled, hair unkempt, eyes bloodshot. We sat at the little kitchen table, neither of us speaking for a long time. "Finally," he said. "You were right to expose me. I just wish I'd been the father you needed instead of the coward I was." His voice broke, and for the first time, I saw tears that weren't about pride or anger. I told him I forgave him, not for his sake, but for mine. Carrying the weight of his choices any longer would have tied me to the same life I'd fought to leave behind. Now, when I think of that day in the gym, it's not the chaos I remember. It's the moment after, when I realized the past no longer had the power to decide who I was going to be next.